Well, welcome back. Just got back from my trip out across the Pacific Northwest. Came back and Santa Claus had showed up with not one, but two Econoline vans. The front one's a 64, this one's a 65. They both crank, neither one start. I got a really good price on them. So, I had to go down to the store, pick myself up a battery. I'm not plugging the store because you know they're hiring a bunch of idiots for parts guys now. There's some good parts guys out there. It's not for you guys, but there's some people which have just enough of a pulse to stay alive. Anyways, this is 64. We're gonna get in and see if we can get her to start. Somebody had done a little bit of rewiring. There's a black wire which they added on behind the solenoid to the distributor. He thinks that it wasn't getting spark. I have no idea, so we're just going with a crank no start. Unless there's some kind of catastrophic failure, you generally need three things for an engine to run. You need fuel, spark, you need compression. I know it cranks and it cranks evenly. I don't know what the compression is like, but it sounds really good just based on years of experience of all that. The noise in the background is my neighbors coming home. I'm going to make sure we have spark, and then I'm going to actually use brake clean as a supplemental fuel to see if I can get it to grab. Give me a few minutes, I'm going to hook up a battery, make sure the wiring is good, make sure when I turn the key on nothing's going to spark up, and we'll go from there. Just a few quick tests. I took my test light and wanted to make sure I got battery voltage on both sides of the coil, which I did. Then I pulled the high tension lead, the coil lead that goes into the distributor. I put it right here. See if I get any arc. I'm not getting any spark at all. To make sure I wasn't seeing anything, one of my other tests that I did, took a little bit of brake clean. Some of the good stuff works as a fuel alternative. Sprayed a little bit into the carburetor right there to see if it would grab it, and I got nothing. So, outside of fuel issues, which I can bypass for the moment, we're going to take the distributor cap off, take a look inside and see if there's an issue inside the distributor itself, or where else the problem is. But right now it looks like your secondary side, which is your points and all that, isn't working. We'll pull it off, get back to you. Just making sure the mechanicals, thanks Arlene, mechanical part of the switches are working. I crank it over, and everything mechanically in there is switching. So I'm going to start going after the coil, wondering what's going on, if it might be the coil, because the points in the condenser are working. I just checked to make sure I wasn't getting any power or anything where I shouldn't be. I was going through up into the points and then it's stopping. So I'm wondering about that coil. It is a new coil, but I'm curious to see. I'm also checking to see how many volts are going to the coil, because they only like about 9 volts. Otherwise they tend to run hot and burn out. So the coil is buried underneath the cap here under my voltmeter, and I'm going to take a look at both terminals to see how much power is there. There's a resistor that cuts the battery power through the ignition switch to get here, so we shall see. Checking the battery voltage at the solenoid. I've got 12.5 volts here. Should about 9 volts on the coil here. I'm reading about 6.5 volts. What I'm going to do is put the captain rotor back on, put a jumper and put 12 volts to that coil for a second, see if we get any changes, because that might be the difference it needs as far as getting enough power for spark. Alright, I didn't film too much of it, but testing everything. The coil tested bad. I had 1.9 on the primary, and I had like not even 2,000 ohms on the secondary. That wanted about 8,000 to 9,000. So I ended up replacing the coil. Got inside the distributor and stuff, and I saw the points. And they look kind of like hammered dog poo. They're sparking, but they're just burnt as all hell, so I figured, you know what, let's get a new set in there. Replace the condenser as well, so I got new points of condenser. Pretty much a major tune-up. Replace the spark plugs. My spark plug wires were questionable, and I figured, you know what, let's at least put another set in because they could use them. Right now, I've got a couple jumper wires. I got one 12 volts when I hooked the battery. 12 volts going through a resistor. I know it's makeshift with jumpers. This is just to see if I'm going to get spark. And then I got the second lead off the ignition side of the solenoid. That drops the voltage down to about 10 volts. The resistor drops it down to about 9 or 8 because you can't put 12 straight volts to the coil. It'll burn it up. So I've got the white wire, which actually goes to the green jumper, which goes to the positive side of the coil. I've got the red jumper, which goes right from the battery voltage on the battery side of the solenoid to the other side of the resistor. Power goes through the resistor and then goes to the coil. In theory, everything should fire up. This is an experiment. I'm not expecting it to, for some reason, just past experience. But we're going to hook up the battery and crank it and see what happens. I also have a can of Brake Clean. I keep talking about that. It's just my fuel supplement. I'm just put a little bit in the carburetor. See if it catches. Be careful with that because you can have a backfire. It can cause problems. If this is your first time doing it, I recommend not doing it, finding a different method. I've done this for 20 years professionally. I still am going to be careful with everything. Everything's hooked up. We're going to hook up the battery and see. Alright, hooking up the battery. A little bit of go-go. That's more than plenty. Testing the brake and the clutch. Ooh. I think she's going to catch. Alright, well, I'm going to disconnect the battery. It's grabbing, so we got spark, we got the initial shit figured out. But there's some good news. Out there's some definite good news. Voltmeter time. What's happening, what I think is happening, I'm going to verify with my voltmeter, is when you have the key on, it's completing the circuit, power is going to the switch, going through the solenoid with a voltage drop coming out from here, powering the coil. As long as I'm cranking, she wants to spin over. And she'll go for a second. When I let go of it, the power through here should power up through the resistor and go back to the coil. And I don't think that's happening. Too much resistance, not enough resistance. My resistor's hot, so I know I'm getting power to it. Let me get my voltmeter out and we will check. Alright, I'm going to hook up the battery. I'm going to start voltage dropping some tests and see what I'm getting at the coil. All I'm going to do is plug in the battery. That will give me my 12 volts to this wire. Let's see what it does. .4, 3, and then so I'm not getting a lot of voltage over here. It's kind of switching back and forth. next step. But I'll blow up the coil, but we're going to bypass the resistor. Very, very hot resistor. I'm not going to do this for long because that coil's going to get hot. I've got it from the switch side, which was working before. And I got it straight 12 volts, so let's give it a go. Alright, we got to figure out the ultimate voltage to the coil. Do a little bit more. Alright, we're good. Coil's not too hot. I still got to come up with a solution for that. But we got her to run. And today is a good day.